Okay. Is that it? Okay. So we stopped with God creating the universe. We're talking about what is the substance of the universe. We talk about faith. What is the definition? There's only one definition for faith in the Bible. It's in Hebrews 11:1. And that definition says that the substance of faith is. So faith is made up of substance and it's made up of evidence. Okay, so what is substance? It means that there's stuff. There must be stuff that makes up the basis of faith. And that stuff, the Bible calls it substance. And that's what we're basically getting at. We're getting at what makes all of life operate. So when God created the universe, he injected information, and from a personal human standpoint, that the information for each one of our lives, he injected before the foundations of the world. It was in his mind. And then he injected it into the universe, and it was picked up by water. There's a great amount of research in just a few little areas of the world today discovering that water is a conveyor of information. Water is like DNA. There's a fourth phase of water called exclusion zone water. It's just recently been discovered. Just in the last few years. And this water actually holds information. It has memory. It has memory. So water has memory. You know that 99% of the molecules in the human body are guess what kind of molecules? They're water molecules. And water is important. I'm going to just tell this one story. I was pleading with God. I said, I'm doing the operations. I'm doing the operation or assisting on the operation, but I'm always thinking about greater things. Because after you take 150 or 300 signatures out, they're pretty much all the same. So I'm thinking, God, I want you to show me the spirit of man. I have lived in every single order. And you know that if you took every single liver in this room out and laid it up there on the stage, I will defy anyone to come by and point your liver out. You know, a liver is a liver is a liver. Now, every one of our livers is alike. I've looked at organs and I said, okay, I know this person. I really love this person. But you know, their liver doesn't look any different than Joe Blow's liver, but I have no love for it whatsoever. Well, what is it that I'm in love with? I'm certainly not their liver. I'm in love with their person. And I'm in love with their spirit, their soul. Something that I couldn't see. And I was struggling to go into surgery. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I had a patient who had a ruptured diverticulum. He had a fever of 104, was going into septic shock, and he needed to be operated right now. So we were going into the operating room. It was cold in the operating room because the patient's temperature was so high. You want to have a cold environment to bring the body temperature down. So we walked into the operating room, and I just washed my hands and said, Lord, I want you to show me the spirit of man. Show me the spirit of man. I want something I can see. Remember, I like to see things. Show me something I can see. I walked in the operating room, put my gloves on, had my gown on. I was walking to the table, and the surgeon that I was assisting on this had already made the incision in the abdomen, and I was coming to the table a few minutes late. And out of this person's abdomen, it was so cold in the room that steam was coming up out of the person's abdomen. And I watched this steam coming out of this person's abdomen. And I was saying, now this is, I was showing you the spirit of the person. He's showing me steam coming out of this person's abdomen. What is he trying to do? What is steam?
Water.
It's water. It's water. Water is God's spirit. But water is the conveyor of information that God injects into our body, into our universe. It's the water molecule that carries all this information. You know how many verses are in the Bible that deal with washing with the Word, washing with water? And water is essential for life. It's the conveyor of information. Okay, so we've got this water here. You know, we all know water is simple. You know, everybody writes water off. I think biologists, doctors, biologists write water off. I mean, I've looked around. So water, H2O, big deal, simple little thing. You compare the molecular structure of water to the molecular structure of DNA. I mean, there's no comparison. I mean, DNA is a multifaceted, huge complex molecule. One, H2O, it can be that important. Yeah, it's that important. So here's this water. This water has got an oxygen molecule, and it's got two hydrogen molecules, H2O. Okay, so that's the basic molecular structure of water. That doesn't change. Water is water. But how that structure lines up in the body has everything to do with its conveyance of information. So when God created light, He created light to show photons down into the water. So we've already got water imbibed and imbued with information. Now He's putting energy into this medium of water. And when photons hit a water molecule, the water molecule takes on a structure that literally becomes polarized. So part of the water molecule has got a negative charge to it, and part of the molecule has a positive charge to it. Okay, a positive and a negative. You line this up, molecule on top of molecule, and what you end up getting in water is that you get water that has negative charge here, and you get water here with a positive charge. So when you have a separation of charges, you have a potential for energy. You know what this is a picture of? This is a picture of a battery. And this is why I call water the battery of the body. We have a Bible in our body, we got a battery in our body, and we're going to spend a lot of time in this course on the gossip in the body. Because the gossip in the body follows up the battery, and it also follows up the Bible in the body. But anyway, so here you've got this. If you take an electrode, you put an electrode here, and you put an electrode down here, and you put a light bulb up here, you can make that light bulb light up. Because the law of nature that God put in, we have a negative charge separating a positive charge. There's a tendency of flow of electrons from the negative to the positive. So you've got electrons flowing here. You know that life, if you take all the molecules in the human body and distill the human body down to a sack full of molecules and set them on a table, they just sit there. They don't do anything. They're not doing anything. They don't become life until they go into motion. Motion is life. In fact, Einstein said emotion is the substance of life. Emotion. So you have motion. Well, what you have here with motion, you have the flow of electrons. A negative charge flowing to a positive charge. A tendency for nature to equalize this. Well, as soon as you have the flow of electrons, that is called electricity. You know what happens when you get the flow of electrons? What happens around this flow of electrons? So you have electricity in water, and when you have the flow of electrons, you get magnetism. Flowing electrons cause a magnetic force around the flow of electrons. So in God's creation of the universe, He created water to produce electricity and magnetic energy. You have electromagnetic energy in water. And that water contains information, which is the information from the Spirit of God, from God's Spirit. So now we've got a situation that God has created so that not only has He injected information into the universe, now He's given us energy to move this information around. And that energy is electromagnetic energy. So that electromagnetic energy comes from this substance right here, that photon. Now, we're all familiar with breaking down all things having to do with life. So we start here with the tissues. And the tissues are made up of organs. And organs are made up of cells. And cells are made up of molecules. And molecules are made up of atoms. And atoms are made up of electrons, protons, and neutrons. Electrons, protons, and neutrons are made up of quarks and all kinds of the 13 subatomic particles that they make up. But you see, all of these things are rationing down to the simplest common denominator that is the substance of the universe. We have a photon. And the photon is what we're all made of. If you distill the human body down to the simplest thing, all of our material world down to the simplest thing, it's made up of our material world is made up of photons. Here's the universe. Okay, the universe is not limited, but I'm limiting it for purposes of this diagram. So here's the whole universe. You know that the universe is a pie chart here. The universe is 99.999% empty space. Nothing that you can see. 99.999% of the universe that we live in is empty space. We're sitting here and our whole lives are involved with the physical reality of the universe. You know, we're concerned about our bodies and about this building and all of that. That only makes up 0.0001% of the universe is made up of physical reality. But here's the physics of the universe is right here, the physical reality, the physicality. This is our reality we live in right here. And this is what we most of the time, this is what we focus all of our attention on. Is only 0.0001% of the entire universe. When in fact 99.999% of the universe is spirit. And Albert Einstein, 80 years ago, said that everything in the physical universe comes from the spiritual universe. His quote is that the field, this is the field, he calls it the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. Particle is physical reality. So physicists back 1,800 years ago were onto this, and we are just latecomers to this information. But this is all spirit out here, and this is the physical world right here. So you have to get that concept in your mind, because we live as physical realities in here, but we're surrounded by all this out here. And God is in every bit of it. But the way we communicate with God is through this medium out here. We have to learn how to communicate with this vacant space out here. And this vacant space is filled with electromagnetic energy. That's what fills this vacant space out here. And there's photons in this room right here. That's what it's filled with. So how does that relate to our humanity? How does that relate to what we're talking about here with the Bible? If we're victims and we just are passerbyers and we don't have any control over what's going on in the universe, it doesn't make any difference at all. It's just an interesting fact. But that's not the truth of it. The truth of it is that God has given us the ability through that power that works within us to communicate with this out here, the spirit world. And the way He has given us this ability, we have to speak its language. Well, the language of it is electromagnetic energy. That's the language of that universe, of spirit world out there. Now, that's not God. I'm not saying God can be limited to an electron or a photon, but His information is conveyed through those things. He has injected His information through the Spirit into these things. For the Heart Math Institute in California has studied humanity. And guess what two organs in the body produce electromagnetic energy that communicates with this empty space out there? Our brain and our heart communicate with the spirit world because of the brain and the heart produce electromagnetic energy. It's measurable. You know that even just a single molecule of DNA produces electromagnetic energy. And it comes out of this molecule here in the form of sound. It comes out in the form of light. And it comes out in the form of magnetic energy. That's the information that's conveyed through that molecule of DNA. So, electromagnetic energy. Now, in terms of the two organs in the body that are capable of operating with this spirit world. You know, the Bible is filled, and this is just about drove me nuts for years, because the Bible talks about the mind. It talks about the heart. And it talks about the heart being spirit on one hand, and it says the heart is the most deceitful thing there is on the other hand. Well, how can a heart be both of those things? Because the spirit is untouched by anything that's vile. So how can the heart be all spirit? And we'll get into this in detail, but the Bible uses 10, when the Bible uses the word mind, there are 10 different Greek words that it uses when it talks about mind. So I mean, really, it's hard to ferret all this stuff out, but it's figurable. You can figure this out, and that's what I'm conveying here, is that our heart has 5,000 times the magnetic potential over the brain. The heart produces 5,000 times more magnetic energy than the brain does. And the heart produces 100 times more electrical energy than the brain does. So knowing that, if you put a human being under the right instrument, what you see is you see electromagnetic energy coming out of a human being. And this has been measured now with the progress of instrumentation. This electromagnetic energy has been measured for miles away from a human being. So not only are you affecting the person sitting right next to you, you're affecting a whole lot more than that. It's limitless. We'll see why. And the brain produces a little bit, but the majority of this interchange, this interaction occurs from the heart. Okay, so if the heart is this fine-tuned instrument that God is using to communicate with His Spirit, what makes that heart function up? Well, we all know, and I've told patients for years, well, the heart is a mechanical pumping muscle. You know, when the Bible talks about heart, they're just talking about a metaphor. Well, I was wrong. The heart has a brain in it. You know, the same molecules that are made in the brain that are necessary for thought and cognition and emotion. I'm talking about dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. All those neurotransmitters are made in cells in the heart. There's a brain in the heart. And when that was first discovered 15 years ago, it was thought, well, of course there's a brain in the heart, because the heart listens to the brain. The brain is constantly telling the heart what to do. So then science said, well, okay, we'll accept the fact that there's a brain in the heart, but all the information is going from the brain to the heart. So they started studying with more intensity the function of the heart brain, and they found that the information flow was from the heart to the brain. Exactly the reverse of what they thought. There's more information going from my heart to my brain and from your heart to your brain right now than the reverse is true. And of course, I love cardiovascular physiology. I taught it, loved it to no end. And I love to know the way the brain regulates heart rate, heart function, and heart muscle contractility and all those parameters. But that's not the essence of the heart. The heart is telling the brain what to do. More so than the brain is telling the heart what to do. So that tells you how important the heart is. The heart is a tremendous reservoir of information. And I will contend that it's the main reservoir of information for our belief and for our faith. So the heart is the main reservoir for this electromagnetic energy. So the heart is made up of its mechanical functioning, yes. But it's also made up of that brain. And in the the brain entertains a thought. That thought is received from outside the brain, and neuroscience, of course, says that thoughts originate in the brain. But the Bible doesn't say that. The Bible says that thoughts occur outside the brain. They come from the spirit world. Albert Einstein knew that. He said that the soul governing agency of the particle is the spirit world. So thoughts come into the brain, and they get entertained in our thinking center, which is the front part of the brain, and then they're involved with our emotional center. So the confluence of thought and emotion creates belief and faith. Belief and faith is a combination of thought and emotion. There's only two emotions. One is fear, and one is love. And fear and love put a color to our thought. And it's the emotional thought marriage that gives rise to our belief. And our belief and our faith is what communicates with this world out here, the spirit world. It's what we believe and what we have faith in. And that originates in our heart. And this can actually be measured. The amount of information can be measured. Well, so what evidence do we have that actually does occur? And what evidence is there is that interaction between humanity and the spirit world? So they began to look at, well, what is the substance out here of these photons, of these particles? How do those things react? What is it that we're made up of as human beings? What is it that we're made up of? What are the laws of the world, of the universe that create that? And there was an experiment done where they took a single photon and they split the photon in half. And they had half of the photon in California, in San Francisco, in a physics lab, and they took the other half to Tokyo, Japan. So they split these photons. This is what we're made up of. They split these photons. This is getting to a principle here. They split these photons by 7,000 miles. And the photons have a spin to them, like all substance in the universe. There's a vibratory frequency to everything. It has a spin to it. So they split this photon, and they took one to Tokyo, and they kept one in San Francisco. Well, say this photon is spinning in that direction right there, and they changed the spin to this direction by exposing it to a magnet. So they reversed the spin on this half photon here. And they were observing this one that was split off of it, its sister or brother photon. Guess what happened to this photon without any intervention from anybody? It reversed its spin just like its sister did. Now, a phenomenal potential was discovered with this physics experiment. That shows that there's something in the universe that connects all particles. There's something that connects all substances. It's not limited by space. It's not limited by time. It's omniscient. It's omnipresent. And it's omnipotent. What does that sound like? That sounds like that there's an interconnecting mind of God that runs the universe, and that human beings are made up of these kinds of particles. The other great conclusion from this is the importance, and this is the most outstanding universal principle in all of biology and physics, and that is the principle of relationship. Is that everything in the universe is related. We are related. I mean, I saw years ago, before I became a Christian, one of the things that led me to become a Christian is that what I saw killing mankind was disorder in our relationships. I couldn't hardly believe that. You didn't tell me I studied cardiovascular physiology, renal physiology, pulmonary physiology, I mean, all of this science and all of this stuff. I have studied all that stuff, and what's killing mankind is how we relate unifying law of the universe that God put into the universe. Why did he put that in there? Because what do you think his underlying goal for us was and is? For us to relate to him. He wants us to have a relationship with him. So even down to the smallest particle known to science, the photon is related. It's tied together with information. So these photons are related. So that, I've had this happen, I can't even tell you how many times. It's so common. I've had women who have come in to me who have daughters that live in Dallas, Texas, and they live in Dodgeville, Wisconsin, and they say, I don't know what it is, but I know my daughter's in car wreck. And I called her, and I found she wasn't at home, and I started calling hospitals, and she was taken to the emergency room. Now, you could explain to me, Dr. Richard, how in the world did I know that? And I had to say, I have absolutely no idea how you knew that, but I know what you're saying. It's true. And I had a lady who came in, she had a daughter who lived in San Francisco, and the daughter was involved in a motor vehicle accident and was severely injured, and she lived to the second when that happened. Well, how did that happen? Because there's a relationship that exists, especially between mothers, because mothers carry us humans longer than anybody else and know us more intimately. We get attuned to their physiology, their vibratory frequency, and it never goes away. It's always there. It's like us and God. I don't know why men have gotten all the credit in the world today, because it's the women that give us life, and it's the women that sustain us. I'll say I have a lot more to say about that, because I'm a family doctor. I've seen who does the bowl work and who does all this stuff in families. It's not the men, I'll guarantee you that. Okay, so this particle that we're all made of is not limited to time and space. Do you realize what power that has on for you and I? That means that you can be thinking about a loved one sitting in Colorado Springs and your loved one is in Tokyo. And the moment you think of that person in Tokyo, they can be the recipient of what it is you were thinking about, or praying about, or asking God to provide them. Instantaneously, it's there. That's the mechanism of prayer working. That's the medium and how it works. So, that relationship and the fact that it's unlimited by time and by space. So, the next thing I want to talk about is another property of this photon that is one of the most liberating observations that you and I can experience. I hope I can explain it right so you get a grasp of it, because it's an abstract thing. Okay, so here's the present time. Here's the future time. Okay, so here's this photon here in the present. And this photon has got a particular spin to it in the present time. And this photon then gets, over a period of time, it eventually goes into the future. So that this photon is here. Now, what was the present, now this becomes the past, right? Because now we're over here in the future. You expose this photon to an electromagnetic force or any kind of an outside force, and you reverse the spin. Out here in the future, you change that photon. Guess what happens to the photon that gave rise to this photon from the past? It takes on the exact same reversal from the future. So what does that mean? What that means is that you have the full capacity as a human being. God has instilled within us. I had a 93-year-old patient of mine who comes from a real long family farm history. Had farmed with his mother and his dad, and had 5 brothers. He had lived what looked like from the outside this idyllic life of this family farm passed down generation to generation. Now we've developed a relationship with him. And I said, Arthur, if you had to give a young guy like me growing up one piece of advice, what would it be? And I was waiting for this nugget to fall out of his mouth, and he said, develop a short memory. I thought, develop a short memory? What's that all about? You see, I hadn't lived long enough to want to forget. Develop a short memory. You know how many times I thought that when I was sitting there telling you, develop a short memory? Man. What this shows is that we have the full capacity through the power of the Spirit, through the power of God, to erase our memory. We have the full potential. We're made up of these particles, and when we come into light in the future, and we begin to incorporate that light into our life, this truth into our life, through mind renewal, directed by God's Word, all those molecules that were in this position back here when this was the present get changed in the past. Now, my knowledge, unfortunately, that doesn't transcend to other people or other circumstances, because we have consequences to our actions. We have consequences to our life. But in terms of us, we don't have to live with the consequences of our heartaches, our sorrows, our abandonments, our abuse, our miseries. We're not confined by the laws of the universe to live with that. That God has built into the universe, He's built it in through the renewing of our mind, through the direction, from the direction of His Word, so we can literally change our past when it's our future. In the future, we can change our past. So we're not constrained to continue to repeat. We're not constrained to live with the miseries that we lived with before. Through faith and through belief, I can't even tell you what import this has. I've talked to women specifically. One girl always comes to mind when I think about her. She was a 35-year-old lady. She had 7 abdominal operations. And I thought to myself, 7 abdominal operations? What's left? What's left in this poor girl's abdomen to take out? And she was coming to me for chronic abdominal pain, just like she'd gone to 7 other doctors over a period of her lifetime. And of course, each one of them took something out. And she still had pain. Well, the source of her pain wasn't in her abdomen. I began to ferret things out and began to ask the questions that nobody else seemed to be asking. And found out that her problem was in her heart. She'd been abused repeatedly by a family member, and then sexual abuse. Do you know what that does to the human organism? I've got a picture of it. This is what it does. On a molecular level, this is what that kind of abuse and abandonment does to the human organism. It burns a hole in our mind and in our heart. And conventional science says, well, they can see it. I mean, I saw this. I've seen this with the electron microscope in the human brain. I've seen it. But conventional science says that's the way it is. You can't change it. But the new science of self-directed neuroplasticity says that when that abuse and abandonment occurred and caused this defect in the brain, this literal hole that occurred in the brain, through focused attention and faith, you can do it yourself. That's why I call this focused faith heal, because that's what it is. And it's got everything to do with your faith, the faith that you have. And if you have Christ, it isn't even your faith. It's the faith of Jesus that does this for you. And it's effortless. All you have to do is believe it. Okay, so the next thing here, we're talking about the electromagnetic energy out there, all this energy which is out there in our environment. Okay, so we take the DNA molecule. Science began to wonder, well, I wonder what effect this empty space out there does a human body have any effect on this empty space? So remember, the empty space has focus which was filled only with photons. And he observed what was happening to the photons. And he found out that the photons lined up in a specific way by the DNA. So the DNA was literally talking to the photons in the universe around it, around the molecule. So that right there proved that our bodies have the ability to change the universe. Because it reordered the photons before they put the DNA in there. The photons were just randomly distributed throughout this vacuum tube. So as soon as they put a DNA molecule in there, the photons became completely aligned with the DNA. Well, then what they did was, they took that same vacuum tube and they took the DNA out to see if the DNA had any lasting effect on the universe. And they saw that the photons remained in the exact same physical characteristic as they were when the DNA was present there. So that the DNA not only gave information to the photons, but the photons remembered it. So not only are we conveying the information, but who we convey the information to, we convey information to the universe out into to the Spirit, communicate with the Spirit of God, and that information stays in the memory. So that shows the interconnection. So much for the concept that we're passive and we're just victims of living in this universe and we have no control over it. We have every bit of control over what goes on right here. Well, then the next question was, well, okay, if that's true, what is there that affects the structure of DNA? So they began to look at people's DNA. And they began to look at people's DNA who were trained prayers. These were people that really had faith. They had a substance of faith based on the gospel. They were trained prayers. And they found that their DNA was stretched out very long. It conveyed an entirely different set of information to the universe than the people's DNA who were admittedly living in anger and unresolved resentment. Their DNA was markedly constricted and contracted. So you can see if you have your DNA molecules in this form right here, it's going to give one set of information to the universe. If your DNA is in this constricted, contracted form, it's going to give another set of information. And that information is as different as the tones in music. Because this information comes out as light and as sound and as energy. So every bit of our emotional situation, our emotional constitution has to do with what kind of information we're conveying to the environment and to other people and to God. Not only that, but when you have a DNA molecule that is constricted like this, do you know that changes what genes are activated in the DNA? The physical structure of the DNA, whether the DNA is this long or this long, has to do with whether or not genes are activated. So people who are living, remember I told you about Richie who was dying of cancer of the colon. And I attribute his cancer of the colon to his condemnation. The fact that he had lived under condemnation all his life, not measuring up, not matching up, wasn't good enough, was worthless. He was an alcoholic. He was no good. He didn't go to church. He lived under that condemnation that changed his DNA. And his DNA began to activate genes that created his cancer. Why did my son Brad get acute lymphoblastic leukemia? He was floating along here fine with a stable family. And all of a sudden he had a tremendous trauma in his life. Tremendous insult. I mean, you know what abandonment and abuse, that's what it measures not. That's what the physical body perceives that kind of thing as. When that happens in a life, the cells view that as abuse and abandonment. And it constricted his DNA and caused genes to become activated that created a cancer in his bone marrow. His lymphocytes, his white blood cells became cancerous, and he had to give lymphocytes, they put leukemia. And along with all the phenomenal medicine he had, we surrounded him by love and support and prayer, and never entertained the concept that he was ever going to die, despite everybody's admonition that he was going to die because he had 3 strokes and was in a coma and was in renal failure and on dialysis and a dozen other things that went wrong with him. But it was faith, it was the tremendous trauma that caused the circumstance, and what brought him out of it was an integration of great medical science and supportive medicine, but it was also supported by love and supported by faith. So this proves that there's a literal conveyance of information between the human body, the DNA, and the environment. And if you look at, there have been multiple experiments in terms of this going on within humanity. They've taken cells out of the sheep of people and taken them to a different building and looked at the structure of the DNA of those cells, and they've taken the person in a living circumstance and put them in a traumatic situation, and not only did their cells change, but the cells that they took out of them down the road 50 miles away also changed. So there's this interpersonal interrelationship that goes on. It's the mind of God that connects everything in the universe. So all of this goes to say that we have control over the spirit world. We have control over the power from within. We can activate it. We can implement it. We're not victims. We are active participants. We have this interpersonal relationship with God that He created, and He created us to convey all of this information through our spirit, soul, body, and our heart. And that's what we're beginning to talk about next week, is the anatomy of our spirit, soul, and body. And I've got some revelation on the heart of man that I don't know anybody who is presently teaching this, but it adds a lot to the basic teaching of spirit, soul, and body. It adds a whole other dimension to that gives a tremendous amount of insight and understanding and revelation to how all this functions for God to manifest Himself through our lives in an unlimited way. So I invite you all to come back for that.